Okay, so today, what I'm going to show you guys is a new and emerging platform by OpenAI ChatGPT that is called Codex. So Codex is the Claude Code equivalent of the OpenAI ecosystem. And so Claude Code came out, I think it was like late last year. And when that happened in late 2025, OpenAI was kind of trying to be like the Google of AI. They were launching things like Sora, which was like a social media video app. They were having all these partnerships with like Hollywood, trying to do all this media stuff. They were, and the other thing was the developer ecosystem at the time was very, it was exciting, but like the plugin ecosystem and the connector ecosystem didn't really exist. There was a definite move from Anthropic, the company behind Claude, to really focus in on Claude Code. Basically, they like discovered this new paradigm in terms of these AI agentic coding models. They focused in on that product, and they also did an incredible job at like focusing on business productivity. So in terms of like the usefulness of like OpenAI, for a long time, OpenAI was winning. Claude, especially Claude Code, came out, and like they just started to separate like this. So around March 2026, um, OpenAI kind of like caught wind of this. They were like, "Whoa!" Like Sora was a massive blunder. Spent billions and billions on it. They had all these different initiatives that were outside of productivity that they ended up shutting down. And so, like way later, probably like 4 or 5 months later, after Cloud Code was released, they came out with this tool called Codex. And so Codex is OpenAI's response to Claude Code. And another thing about OpenAI, I'm going to give you guys some history, is that the fundamentals of the OpenAI business have been very shaky for the last couple of years. A lot of people don't realize this, but OpenAI is not profitable. They take a lot of very big bets, a lot of very big swings in a lot of different directions without a laser focus. Like Anthropic's just like productivity, business, this is what we do, and a very high ethical standard. OpenAI is still a company in flux. So for all of these reasons, I've been hesitant to give you guys Codex and kind of put this on your radar. I wanted to see the development of the ecosystem, the development of the models as it pertains to software engineering and productivity. And now it feels like we've gotten to this point in the history of AI, and my confidence in this ecosystem has gotten to the point where I am seeing for the first time a lot of developer support. I'm seeing people who I really trust in the space come out and saying that Codex is something that's worth investing in. And for the first time, I feel like this platform and this paradigm has a lot of longevity. And so, what I'm going to do today is that I'm going to walk you through first, kind of like the comparison of the Claude ecosystem to the Codex ecosystem, to the OpenAI Anthropic. And I'm going to walk you through the pricing plans. I'm going to show you how some of the features overlap. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how to set it up yourselves if you guys want to dive in. And then I'm going to show you kind of how I am using it. What I found the best use of Codex is kind of like hiring a second super brilliant AI engineer. So it really is focused on engineering Codex itself and sort of how I set this up within my own projects, doing something what I call adversarial programming. And so I'll go into more of like what that means. But the first thing I wanted to do is just kind of give you guys the links. We're going to set it up and we can go ahead and get started. Also, really good news. As of literally yesterday, they just announced a special deal for people who are using Codex Business, which you guys just might want to, where you get $500 in free credits. And so it just happened yesterday. And so it's just good timing, I guess. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen and let's go ahead and dive in. And so just like Claude, Codex has its own native application. And so this is different than the ChatGPT app that you might already have on your computers. And the other thing about Codex is that it's also a command line interface. Now, this might look a lot like Claude, But the difference is like you'll see here, it says GPT. It also has like slash commands integrated. So you can do slash, do the model, the permissions, the key mac, the vim, like a lot of the same things that are overlapping. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to walk you through how to get the app, how to set up the command line tools for those of us who are working out of terminal, and also like go through sort of the pricing plans. So generally speaking, the pricing is very, very similar to Claude. And so this is in pounds because right now I'm in Europe, but they have like sort of a regular plan. They have the $20 a month, 100 a month, and then if you go up another tier, it's 200 a month. So it seems that like a lot of these. Oh, oh, sorry about that. Let me go ahead and change my camera to OBS. Uh, Sorry about that. One sec. Um, Stop virtual camera. Start virtual camera. Uh, okay, so I'm gonna just remember for this one to share. I'll just share my screen natively, and then I'm just gonna have to remember to update it there. Can you see my screen? Okay, cool. Yeah, yeah. For some reason, OBS is being wonky, but thanks for calling that out. Okay, so this is the pricing sheet. And like I said before, it's very similar to the Claude Code ecosystem. You have the regular like low plan, you have the plus for 20 bucks a month. And I think the best way to start is to use the plus. Make sure you actually get use out of it before upgrading to the pro. Also, like I said before, for new businesses who are signing up for this, they are offering a $500 free credit. And so if you sign up for a business plan, you can probably take advantage of those free credits. And so the way that you get this is you're just going to go to the Codex website. Let me, Codex, OpenAI. I know I have it open somewhere. Okay, here it is. All right. You can download the app directly onto your device. Here, I'm going to pop this into the chat. Codex link. And then similar to Claude Code, there's also a specific instruction for setting up the command line. And so it's just a two prompt code, which I will put into here. And so the way that you do it is you first put on, if you're on a Mac, you're first going to run this command, Mac install script. I'm gonna pop it in. It's a curl command, which just grabs it from the internet. And then the next thing you're going to run is Codex. Okay, so all you have to do is open up the command line and go into new line in terminal, paste this in. It's this curl function, and then it's going to download and install Codex. And then once it's installed, it's going to ask you to log in using your ChatGPT account. You're going to want to use the same account for the app as you do your regular ChatGPT, as you do Codex. And then the way that you summon this is just like we type in Claude normally. Instead, you type in Codex. And by the way, you can run both Codex and Claude code side by side. And so this is me running Claude. It's my go-to every single day. And then what I normally do is I'll actually pop in Codex into another project in another terminal, basically pointing it at the same project that I am using. And I'll go more into what that looks like. But first, let's dive into some of the similarities. And so in Codex, so there's the pricing. Okay, so one thing that is a little bit confusing, and this is also another reason why I didn't really love Codex and the ChatGPT ecosystem in the beginning, is that they kept on changing naming conventions. And so in the beginning, they would be like, yeah, like now we have these things called plugins, and then they tried naming something connectors, and then they would like constantly change the naming conventions for things, which was really annoying. But in the Codex ecosystem, the name for connectors is called plugins. So if you go into the Codex app, once you download it, you can head over into plugins, and you'll see many of the same plugins that you would find inside of Claude Code. Now, the interesting part is that the standard for these integrations, right, is very similar to the ones that you're going to find inside of Claude Code. So OpenAI basically they tried creating their own way to connect in apps. They tried to create like their own special version of things, and developers didn't like it. And nowadays, they basically folded to using the Anthropic standard, which is called an MCP, a multi-context protocol. And so, again, in the beginning, OpenAI was like, yeah, this is how you plug in. Wasn't really working for developers, wasn't really working for third-party engineers. And so their plugin ecosystem now uses the same standard as the Claude ecosystem, which basically means if there is a Claude connector that you find inside of your backend, you should be able to take those connectors, many of the same ones, and plug them directly into Codex. Okay, so if you go into connectors, there should be some overlap, and even if there's not, you can also, um, you know, plug it in through a custom way. And so you're gonna find in the plugin ecosystem there's a lot of overlap. So connectors on Claude, plugins on Codex. Keep that in mind. So if you go and try to go into Codex connectors or ChatGPT connectors, it's not the same thing. We use plugins on Codex. A little bit confusing, but um, it's just the way the ecosystem works. The next button you're going to notice over here on the left is automations. Now, automations in coming from Claude over into Codex is basically the same thing as what you might find inside of a scheduled task, right? Inside of Claude, we've went through these before, right? And also is the same thing as like a routine. So routines are basically more advanced scheduled tasks, but in the Codex ecosystem, a routine or scheduled task, they just call it an automation, right? And you also notice that the UX is very similar to Claude. So if I go over here into Claude, into my scheduled tasks, top left-hand corner, what do you get? You get new tasks, you can set it up manually, or you can create it with Claude. So if you go over into Codex automation, you go up here, you can create manually, or you can create it with chat. And so many of the same features are very, very similar. It's the ability to set time. It's also the same deal as the Claude setup, where as long as your computer is on and connected to power, you have the ability to run automations inside of the background. Now, what's interesting is that while Claude gives us like 5 different ways to automate things, like they have routines, manage agents, schedule tasks, Codex has actually simplified it and just called like everything automations. And so it's kind of like an all-in-one interface for setting up specific automations and workflows. But again, you can choose your task, you can select projects, pretty much all the same stuff that you're going to find inside of inside of Claude, but inside of here. Okay. Now, another thing they've caught up on. Okay, just like inside of Claude, you have something called dispatch, right? So dispatch allows us to connect our mobile devices, right, that can send a message to our Claude ecosystem in order to trigger commands and code. OpenAI has the same feature, but they just call it Codex Mobile, right? So within your ChatGPT app, if you pull over, like if you logged in with the same account, you can actually open up Codex, and as long as your computer is connected to power and running, you can send a remote message to Codex in order to take an action on your behalf, right? So it's quite interesting because we have what we're seeing over in this ecosystem is one, we have connectors, which are now our plugins in the Codex ecosystem. We have scheduled tasks or routines, which are called automations, and we have dispatch, which is called Codex Mobile. Now, obviously, OpenAI is playing a big game of catch up here. It's basically like them trying to keep up with Claude and all the amazing features that are coming out. But another thing I'm noticing is that it's kind of like a pendulum, right? Like Claude is kind of taking over the world, but OpenAI is kind of playing this game where they're moving a bit slower now, just because they're behind, and they're kind of finding all the things inside of the Claude ecosystem that are extremely useful, and basically pulling those over into their own specific ecosystem. As a result, they have a much simpler interface, right? So if you just like download Codex, get the $20 a month plan, open up a new chat, like this basically is Claude Code, right, in a much simpler interface. If you wanted to do a connector and a plugin, you don't need to go into the back settings and go do all this crazy stuff. You have it all available to you in one push. If you want to create an automation, again, very simple interface that's really findable. And if you want to power that all from your phone, again, it's one click away. So it's kind of this like this interesting thing where you have the leader right now, which is definitely Claude, but then Codex gets to kind of watch and see what's useful, and then like cherry pick all the different features that they integrate. And so this is sort of, I'm just giving you this kind of overview of the ecosystem. Let's continue going through it. So also one thing to point out is that in terms of the overlap is that when it comes to skills inside of Codex, they are also called skills. And so skills that are inside of Claude are also called skills inside of Codex. So just to kind of run that through one more time. Connectors, called plugins in Codex. Claude connectors, Codex plugins. Claude scheduled tasks, Claude routines are called Codex automations. Claude dispatch is the equivalent of Codex mobile. Claude skills are Codex skills. So it looks like that same paradigm of skills is going to be a standard. Also worth noting, Google has adopted the same approach. And so they also call it skills. It kind of makes sense because people think in terms of skills already. And so these different ecosystems are kind of, picking off that. So in order to get started, right? Once you open up Codex, one thing that does make this a little bit unique is that you do have to connect it to a project, right? So inside of like Claude, so Codex is like a different ecosystem than ChatGPT, okay? So normally inside of Claude, like you can just open up a chat, get going, and get on with your life. Now Codex, you do have to connect this to a project. This is a working directory inside of your device. But once you're in there, right, you also you can just kind of continue rolling with things. And also the same as Claude, you can also choose your model on the right? If you actually like kind of compare these different interfaces side by side, they look very simple. They look very similar, right? So you have, just like Claude, the highest model is going to be first. Same deal as Claude. If you go down to ChatGPT 5.4, 5.3, right, you're going to have different levels. And also you have this new thing, which also is inside the Claude ecosystem that's called reasoning. Reasoning in the Codex is just like how many tokens are you ready to spend on the specific task? The higher the reasoning, the faster it's going to run, but also the more tokens you're going to spend. Inside of Claude, and by the way, this is a new feature, they call that effort. So in Claude, it's called effort. In Codex, it's called reasoning. But you're kind of seeing like a very similar shape of things, right, across these different ecosystems. And it looks like we are beginning to actually see a form take place and a standard amongst these different tools. All of this is like brand spanking new. We are going through like a massive change in the way that things are done. And so what we're seeing here is kind of a standard that's kind of being established. Okay. Now, some things, let me go back into my notes here because there's a lot to cover. Okay. So just like another similarity between Claude, Codex also has a dedicated plan mode. So if you do /plan, you're able to run plan mode. It's a different model. It's going to plan things before you build. If you plan to use Codex to build something, still always start in plan mode. Be very specific in terms of what you are trying to accomplish. Okay, now getting started. Now, once you have Codex installed, the first thing I recommend doing is there's a specific tool that's called memories. Okay, so this is another thing that Codex saw in the Claude ecosystem is that you didn't have consistent memories between sessions. This is why we have our Claude memory training, teaching you how to set up memories. So the first thing I recommend doing is once you open up Codex, whether it's on the app or inside of the command line tool, is to do /memories and just make sure that those are turned on. Okay, and so what this is going to do is that it's going to have persistent memory between all of your sessions on Codex. And I think it's just a good thing to have. We went through the Claude memory setup. So that's the first thing that I thought was really good. They just, instead of like Claude is, it requires a third party plugin, it requires all the setup. You can just turn memories on directly, and it's going to remember things across. Now, another thing is that I really like inside the Codex ecosystem is that you can do something that's called slash goal. Okay. And what the goal will do is that Codex, if you put it into goal mode, is going to consistently run until a specific goal is achieved. Oftentimes, what I find inside of Claude Code is that getting it to the point where it's going to continue doing this until like a specific goal is achieved, it's not really shaped in that way. Like oftentimes it will like kind of stop and ask you questions. Other times it's going to kind of like build more like a software engineer versus the shape of Codex. I find when I put in slash goal, it will continue running all the way through until the goal is accomplished in a more consistent way. And so what I'm finding is just A/B testing. I've been doing some A/B testing amongst like Claude versus Codex. Is I'm actually finding that Codex has a deeper like goal standard, which I know is like a slight shift. Like it's not like maybe that big of a difference. Like, yeah, I can give a goal to Claude, but it accomplishes it. But I'm finding that ChatGPT and Codex go a lot deeper into the specific issue. And it's also, for me, been able to find a lot of bugs that Claude Code has not. Because most of us in all of our projects were exclusively using Claude Code. And actually, I can just give you an example of like one bug that I was like struggling with. And so I had this bug where there was like an email error where like it was supposed to send an automated email to somebody who hosted team training. I tried for like 30 minutes and to with Claude Code manually, trying to like get it to solve it. It couldn't figure it out. And all I had to do was open up Codex inside of the same project, right? Run the same bug fixing, and it found it like that. And it also found all of the problems that were in the initial setup that Claude had originally generated and coded and was able to fix it. And so what I'm finding is that the best use of Codex versus Claude, and I don't think there's a term for this yet, but I'm going to try to make one up anyway, is what I call adversarial programming. And so in the world of software engineering, it's very standard practice that you would have one developer, let's call it Claude in this instance, creates the code. And it was always a requirement for us as software engineering teams to have somebody who reviews the code. And that always had to be a separate person. Now, most of us, when we're going through creating automations, we're creating all this massive code, we have Claude both review create the code, generate it. All that code gets stored in its memory. It has a specific way of doing things. And then we also have Claude review the code, which is quite good at. But what I'm finding the better setup is to generate the code using Claude. And then what I'll do is I'll actually go into Codex and then activate it to review the code and be hypercritical. And so just for the example, like this email automation setup, the automation was supposed to take my Fireflies transcript, extract all the trainings I need to send to the clients I did the training with, and then pop them an email. Claude hasn't been able to figure out how to do this. I'm not really sure why, but basically I took that same bug, I put it into Codex, it found it, fixed it, and then gave deliberate feedback to Claude on how it can actually improve itself. And so it's kind of like, and this is pretty standard, right? So if you have a feature that you're building with Claude, you can just plug it directly into Codex, either to give deliberate feedback, or you can try them other way. And what I'm finding is the models, even though they might feel the same in terms of what they're doing, which is ultimately generating code, the shape of them is so fundamentally different. Like the way that they work, the way that they think, ultimately the code that's being outputted is so different. It feels like an entirely different, also hyper powerful software engineer that we can like run things back from. So I'm finding this ping pong, right? Claude to Codex, especially for coding projects, and then Codex back into Claude. Very, very helpful because each model, because the training data is different, because the model setup is so different, they find things that the other one wouldn't necessarily think about. And I'm finding the coding quality to just be so much higher than if I was just to use Claude Code. And so, if you want to like a first go in terms of using Codex, what I would recommend doing is going into the app or going into the command line, putting it into a project, right, that you're already working like this is my Light School website, and just asking it to review the code and be critical and find like unoptimized setups. And I do this regularly inside of Claude Code. It's like, oh, everything's good, like everything's chill, no problems here, nothing to worry about. Versus Codex, absolutely ripped the entire coding repository apart, and it made all these incredible suggestions that has made everything so much smoother. So it's interesting because like the same best practices we found in software engineering also seem to be playing out in agentic engineering, right? Like using different agents on the same project, especially when they are, doing this red team, blue team thing. Like you go build and I go review, or vice versa, right? Blue team builds being Codex, red team reviews. Is I finding it to be a much better workflow, and one that I'm planning to continue with probably for the rest of my life. So this is sort of the overview. Another cool thing about Codex is is they have a really cute feature. So if you go into Codex and terminal and do /pets, you can actually choose a little pet to put on the right side. If you look on the right side of the screen, you have all these like little dudes. I don't know. I thought it was cute.
It says it isn't available.
It's not available. Okay, well, sometimes it's not available, I guess, but you can do it. It might be because you need a different terminal, but inside of iTerm you can do it. I don't know. It's a nice little touch, and also zooming out. So the date of this specific training that we are doing today, it's Tuesday, June 9th in 2026. The reason why I'm calling that out specifically, um, both Anthropic and OpenAI, the companies behind these two incredible tools, they both filed for IPOs, which means they're about to go public on the stock markets. Basically, what that means in practice, you have these two private companies. Anthropic, very profitable. They're absolutely crushing it. OpenAI, never been profitable. They're just burning money. I think they're spending a couple billion a month, right? Just trying to maintain their systems. But once they go public onto the public stock markets, it's basically going to open them up to tons of new capital, tons of additional financing, which also gives me much more confidence that OpenAI will be, and Codex is an extension of that, will be available in the long run. The other thing to kind of keep in mind is I've been watching a lot of developers from OpenAI. They basically they're behind on the enterprise business productivity game. They're about to be launching a lot of absolutely incredible features that I've been seeing previews of inside the Codex ecosystem. Like there's rumors that they're going to create like a drag and drop interface where you can connect agents through drag and drop. They have like an all-in-one interface for like building any business automation. Like it's like a sort of all-in-one app. There's also rumors of them using Codex to launch their own agentically powered supercomputer. And so I wanted to, and this is all going to come through the Codex ecosystem. Just like Claude Code gets all the latest and greatest features, Codex is also going to get all the new updates before regular people do. And so I wanted to put this on your guys' radar. Even if you might not have a coding project where you're actively doing adversarial programming using both models, I wanted to get this installed and put this on your radar, as I think, especially leading up to the IPO, there's about to be a giant war for public capital. There's about to be some crazy launches that are coming from both of these companies. And so this is what I wanted to cover today. So yeah, get Codex set up. Make sure to take advantage of those free credits, right? And begin playing with it and see and plug it into the same project as you would Claude, and kind of see the difference in terms of how they do things. Right? If you're building something, use Codex in order to give it review and feedback, right? Or you can do it the other way around, where Codex builds it out and then use Claude for the same feedback system. Begin connecting your connectors and embracing this. And as new features come out inside of Codex that I think are worth mentioning, I'm going to make sure to keep you guys in the loop and put them on your radar. Okay.